Sunday evening. Sun's about to set, as you can see off in that direction. And this time, let's have a look at the mountain, but there will be no deer in the foreground. You can see the sun is still illuminating the top of Canyon Mountain. I've already set up the observatory, got the scope poking at the zenith. Did the usual startup procedure as covered in a previous video. Tonight we're going to do something really special. Instead of working really hard to pull all the data together about galaxies after we've imaged them, I've gathered it together before. So I'm going to be able to tell you, based on my latest mathematical algorithms, what size telescope should give you a good view. And we're going to assume that with the current settings on this 6-inch scope, we are getting views of an 18-inch telescope. And of course, a lot will have to do with where in the sky the galaxy is visible. All the galaxies will be in the flying horse Pegasus. So probably be another, it's about 6:45 right now. It'll probably be another hour and a half before we begin. Well, the time now is 8:17 and on my mark, 20 seconds. According to Gemini 2 database, what you're looking at here is Enif. It is the nose star of Pegasus, the flying horse. We are going to be spending the evening in Pegasus. I've got 19 galaxies to go through. I have done a lot of preliminary mathematics. I sure wish I still had a spreadsheet, but I don't have one on my latest computer. So I had to manually calculate it, but I'll tell you one thing about doing manual mathematics calculations. You sure get familiar with the algorithms. I'm going to scooch in here a little bit, fill the screen a little bit more, and we are going to begin our exploration of galaxies and with NGC 7137. I'm going to tell you right now, I've already calculated it out. A good view of NGC 7137 would be through mathematically, a 19-inch telescope, which means it's right in the wheelhouse of 128 flood, 42 decibels gain, and 75x. You can still see the ghost of Enif on the screen. I started it as soon as the GO2 managed to stabilize itself on NGC 7137. It should appear somewhere in the shadow left behind. Now, I'll give you a little bit of data on this. I did some research in advance. NGC 7137 is a spiral of the class A_BC, which means it's at the top side of the tuning fork. It has an average surface brightness, and I'm not sure whether this is calculated based on blue violet or on visible light, of magnitude 2302. That means each arc second is magnitude 2302. The size of this galaxy is pretty much face on, as you can tell on the screen, is 1.8 by 1.7 arc minutes. That gives it a visual magnitude I have actually looked up. It's very strange on this galaxy. This is one of the few galaxies that's even fainter in yellow-green light than it is in blue-violet, which means there's an awful lot of young stars being created in this galaxy. And the aperture of a telescope that should give a decent view, and what I mean by a decent view is a sense of, some kind of sense of the structure of the galaxy. Maybe not fine detail, but you can see a significant portion of the galaxy. You should be able to see the core, you should be able to see the spiral arms, at least the spiral envelope, and there should be some kind of a sense of a frontier to it. And from what I can see here, we are getting that. We're getting a core, we are getting a frontier. This is a face-on galaxy, and this is everything I would expect to see through the eyepiece of a 18 to 20 inch aperture telescope. So far, the mathematics are proving out to be relatively respectable. Let's go on and see if we can follow this pattern throughout the night. Okay, both this galaxy, NGC 71 and 77 and 7137, are both in the sky's middle third. I'll give you the data as calculated earlier. This is also an capital AB spiral, which means it has more than a couple spiral arms, from what I can tell. But it's a class B, so it's one step closer than 7137 to being lenticular. It's got a blue-violet magnitude cumulative of 12.2 with an average surface brightness per arc second of 22.61, about 0.4 magnitudes. That's pretty significant. It's brighter than our last study, NGC 7137. However, it is larger, 2.8 by 1.9 arc minute, and it has a brighter, actually does have a brighter average surface brightness in the per arc minute realm of 13.3. A 17-inch scope should give a good look at this galaxy. So what we're hoping to see here is, in this case, the core is extremely bright, and we want to get some kind of sense once again of a frontier. And I can't tell you whether that's the case because the core is so very bright in this galaxy. I'm going to synchronize to it, and then we'll go on to our next study. But I do want to give you some data that's actually in the database here of the Gemini 2. So I'm going to punch it in while you have a look at the galaxy. Yeah, I am getting a sense of a frontier to this galaxy. NGC 7177, a galaxy in Pegasus, magnitude 11.2, 3.2 by 2.1, which is actually larger than what is specified in the Sky Live database that I looked up today. It's magnitude 11.2, spiral with a bar and a lowercase b, which means it's on the bottom of the tuning fork, so it should only have a couple of spiral arms. 51 million light years distant, right ascension 22 hours, 41 seconds, declination of plus 17 degrees, 44 minutes and 15 seconds, again in the sky's middle third. I would think this galaxy could use a little bit more than 75x to perhaps distribute the light, but there's nothing I can do about that because I'm having to use a half power Barlow, and I do not want to do any of the zoom function this evening. So there's our look, NGC 7177. Here we're having a look at NGC 7217, very similar to our last study, which was NGC 7177. This is a spiral with a capital A, so it's on the top of the tuning fork, with a lowercase ab, so it's 1.5 times removed from the lenticular class. Its blue-violet magnitude is 12.94, has an average surface brightness based on the SkyLive.com's database of 22.93. Anything less than magnitude 23 is pretty bright for an average surface brightness per arc seconds. However, this galaxy is quite large in terms of the SkyLive, 4.5 by 3.8 arc minutes, has a visual magnitude. Now, why is it 15.0? Something wrong with that. And the aperture is 33. Now, I bet you that 15 is what I calculated using the equation to determine what the aperture was, so I must have misquoted the visual magnitude. We'll get a look at what that is when I look at the 7217. It's actually magnitude 10.1 in the visual range. But collectively, when you run the mathematics on this one, it is magnitude 15. Therefore, it requires a 33-inch aperture telescope And I do not agree with that. There must have been some kind of error in my calculation. I will check it mañana. So I suspect this is as good a view as any of the 18-inch views we've already gotten this evening. I will double check my data at a later point. Oop, just had a satellite passage. Again, we are getting a very good view. Every one of the galaxies we've seen so far are certainly within the range of the Rev 2 system operating at 128 flood, 42 decibels gain through a 6-inch scope. This galaxy, NGC 7331, according to the Gemini 2 handset, is magnitude 9.5, 10.2 by 4.2 arc minutes, spiral with a bar and a lowercase c, so thrice removed from the lenticular class. So a fairly immature galaxy when it comes to its development. 46 million light years distant. Basically says this galaxy is 150,000 light years in diameter, comparable to Messier 31. It's at right ascension 223704, declination plus 34 degrees, 24 minutes and 57 seconds. Now I look at the calculated data. It's a spiral capital ABC, according to the Sky Live. It's got a blue-violet magnitude of 10.35, an average surface brightness of 23.08 per arc seconds, 9.3 by 3.8 arc minutes, and okay. The visual magnitude I'm calculating here is not the visual, it is the value, at least here, of when you take the average surface brightness in arc minutes plus the average surface brightness in arc seconds. You subtract one from the other, divide by 4, add it to the average surface brightness in arc minutes, which is a very complicated formula. It basically predicts that a 20-inch telescope should give a good view, and we are definitely getting a good view of NGC 7331. That's quite spectacular. Thank you. Okay, have a look at this galaxy as it develops and tell me whether or not you think it reveals enough of itself that you can get a sense of it through, if you were looking through the eyepiece of a telescope. Obviously, there's a beautiful edge-on spiral above it. The galaxy itself is towards the middle of the screen. This galaxy is NGC 7332. Now, rather than giving you any more data on that I have basically done research on online, with 7332, this is basically a galaxy that should look very nice. Through a 9-inch telescope, which basically would have 9-inch scope would have 1.5 magnitudes less light gathering capability than what we're seeing here. So anyway, NGC 7332, Galaxy in Pegasus, magnitude 11.1, 3.8 by 1.1 arc minute, lenticular spiral, 60 million light years distant. Right ascension 223724, declination 234753. Now, this series of 5 galaxies basically concludes the studies that are located in Pegasus that are out towards the head and the feet, and it looks like just about all of them are up in the vicinity of the head of the Pegasus towards the north. Now, so far, every one of these galaxies, except for 7217, is coming very close to what I would expect to be great, good views through what I would consider an 18-inch aperture telescope at the eyepiece. Okay, have a look. We're going to do this one again later on. We are kind of tilted a little bit to the south and a little bit to the east. We're probably an hour from approaching culmination on NGC 7448. So maybe what I'll do is I'll head on inside, come back out in about an hour, we'll have another look and compare the views. Now, first thing I would ask you, if you saw at the eyepiece of a telescope a view of this galaxy, NGC 7448, that looked as comparable to what we're seeing here, would you be impressed? The galaxy, after all, is magnitude 11.7, 2.6 by 1.2 arc minutes. It's a spiral of the lowercase bc, which means it only has 2 spiral arms, apparently. And looking at the Hubble Duvaculair's morphological chart, it's 101 million light years distant, probably puts it about 70,000 light years in diameter. We're at right ascension 23 hours, 1 hour from 0 hour, with a declination of plus 15 degrees, 58 minutes, and 48 seconds. Now, I'll give you the full set of data on 7448. Hopefully I didn't screw it up. This, however, says it's a spiral of class A, capital AC. So there's a disagreement in the databases right off to begin with. It also says the blue-violet magnitude is 12.0, whereas the magnitude here is 11.7, which could be the visual magnitude. It's very bright on a per arc second basis. Let's see if it's the right one. 7448. Yes, this is the brightest one I found. It's magnitude 21.66 per circular square. I would just call it circular arc second. This is pretty extraordinary. It's the brightest on the per arc second basis of any of the 19 galaxies we will be looking at tonight. Okay, it's a little after 9. I didn't stay in as long as I might have, primarily because I redid the math on the one galaxy that was way overestimating the aperture. That was NGC 7217, but I thought I'd let you have a look at NGC 7448 before I go back to that other galaxy, which should be about culminating at this time. Nice view is 7448. Once again on that one, spiral capital AC, magnitude 12. This is the brightest average surface brightness galaxy of the 19 tonight in terms of per arc second, 21.66. Kind of a suboblate galaxy, 2.1 by 0.8 arc minutes, magnitude 11.8. So let's go ahead and revisit 7217. All right, let me explain the data on 7217. The data online was all over the place, but fairly close, but not as close enough to make a good estimate as to decent aperture size evaluation. What I came up with for 7217, it was variation in the type. I left the blue-violet magnitude the way it was in SkyLive, but I don't even use that as a calculation unless there's no other reference, and then I have to compensate a little bit. ASB, according to SkyLive, 22.93. The SkyLive was a little large. It was 4.5 by 3.8. That had a lot of impact on the calculation. Values I found elsewhere were 3.9 by 3.2 arc minutes. Also, SkyLive was a little faint by a whole magnitude. This galaxy is actually considered to be magnitude 11. And then when I factor all that in, it turns out that it's pretty much a galaxy that should look pretty decent through a 21-inch telescope, which is right in the ballpark of what we are seeing here using the Rev2 imaging system. Given the fact that it's a little later, let's go ahead and push on for some other galaxies. By the way, this galaxy 7217 is just about overhead culminating. So this is a great view of the sky. The stars should look nice, the background sky nice and dark. A nice aesthetic view of what should ordinarily take a 20 to a 22-inch telescope to give a decent view. Okay, here we have NGC 7454, a galaxy in Pegasus. On the Gemini 2, magnitude 11.8, but in terms of the sky live, about 12.2. It's 2.2 by 1.6 arc-minute elliptical, 84 million light years distant. We're at right ascension 230106, declination plus 16 degrees, 23 minutes, and 20 seconds. 7454 is a class E3 elliptical, magnitude 13.6 in the blue violet, which means it should be about 12.1 visually, because there's quite a difference between the blue violet and on these older galaxies. However, it's got an average surface brightness per arc second of 2258, fairly bright, 1.5 by 0.8 arc minutes. Sky Live says magnitude 12.2, and the database on the Gemini 2 says 11.8. Both are ballpark. A 10-inch scope should give you a good view, but because it's an elliptical, it will lack texture. So let's move on to the next study. All right, here we have NGC 7457. And the data on this baby is, it's an elliptical that's just on the border. It's a lenticular, which is on the border of becoming an elliptical. It's got a blue-violet magnitude 11.04 with an average surface brightness per arc second of 2357. Largish, 4 by 2.2. It has a visual magnitude, therefore, about 1 magnitude brighter, given its station, so it should be somewhere around magnitude 10. It's rated as a 19-inch scope, but the magnitude on the Gemini 2 is 11.2, which is because it's the same. It's basically the same as the blue violet, so it's possible they actually got the visual magnitude read into it, and it should look good in a 19-inch scope. And we are getting a very good look here, so I'm kind of pleased with this. Math's been tracking pretty good, except the data has been a bit squirrely this evening between various sources. Okay, NGC 7479 is the last galaxy in the second group of galaxies, more along the midline of Pegasus. 7479, according to Gemini 2, galaxy in Pegasus, bright, magnitude 10.9, but large, 4 by 3.1. Spiral with a bar, lowercase bc, so 2.5 times removed from lenticular. 109 million light years distant puts this probably at around 130,000 light years in diameter. We're at right ascension 23 hours, 4 minutes, and 56 seconds, with a declination of plus 12 degrees, 19 minutes, and 20 seconds. If we look at the data on 7479, it's considered a spiral with a bar, lowercase bc, which it maps perfectly against the Gemini 2 on the Sky Live. It's given a blue-violet magnitude 11.6, which is about 0.7 magnitudes fainter, and I would expect that in a spiral galaxy, with an average surface brightness of about 23. Remember, they range from about 21.5 at the brightest to about magnitude 24 or plus on the faintest in terms of average surface brightness per arc second. Size in the Sky Live is 3.6 by 2.8, which is actually smaller than the 4 by 3.1 in the Gemini database. In terms of visual magnitude, I don't have a value here for the Sky Live, but it was 10.9. And in terms of calculating aperture size that would give a decent view, like the one we're getting here, it's a 19-inch telescope. That's a very good view. Okay, we had just leaped to the the easternmost portions of Pegasus, and we're not in a bad part of the sky, so I might be able to conclude all this without having to take another break. What we're seeing here is NGC 7619, a galaxy in Pegasus, of course. Magnitude 11.1, so quite bright. 2.8 by 2.5 arc-minute elliptical, 170 million light years distant. As an elliptical galaxy, this one's showing quite a bit of an aura of faint nebulosity going out to the perimeter. We're at right ascension 23 hours, 20 minutes, and 14 seconds with a declination of 8 degrees, 12 minutes, and 22 seconds. Above the celestial equator, we are looking at the scope. We are definitely in the sky's middle third. But what about calculated data? 7619. All right, NGC 7619 is an elliptical class 3, has a BV of 12.7, which means you want to subtract about, because it's an elliptical, about 1.5 magnitudes. So that gets us right down to the magnitude 11.1 that is specified on the Gemini 2. It's got an average surface brightness of 22.99. You'd expect that from an elliptical, fairly bright. 2.5 by 2 arc minutes in the sky live, and it's a little larger in the Gemini, 2.8 by 2.5. The brightness of this galaxy should, as I said, be about 11, and that's pretty much the case, 11.1. And from what the calculation that I've done on 7619, a 16-inch telescope should give a nice eyepiece view, except we have an issue. It's an elliptical, and therefore there's not much in the way of texture. Okay, here we have NGC 7626. It is an elliptical, class 3, considered by the Sky Live to be magnitude 12.8 in the blue violet, which means it's probably somewhere around 11.3, and it says 11.1 here on the Gemini handset for visual. Gemini handset says, of course, it's a galaxy in Pegasus, magnitude 11.1, fairly large, 3 by 2.7 arc minutes, calls it a class E2. 157 million light years distant, puts it about the size of Messier 31 at 150,000 light years in diameter. We're at right ascension 23/20/42, declination 8 degrees 13 minutes, and it is in the sky's middle third, so this is a fairly valid view of it. This galaxy, 7626, would be a good look through a 17-inch telescope, but because it's elliptical, you're not going to get much in the way of texture. Now we're off to NGC 7625, a galaxy in Pegasus, of course. Magnitude 12.1 on the Gemini, 1.6 by 1.6 face-on spiral of the lowercase a, so it nestles right up there against a face-on lenticular. 72 million light years distant, probably puts this at about 40 to 50,000 light years in diameter. We're at right ascension 23 hours, 20 minutes, 30 seconds with a declination of plus 17, 13, 33. 7625 calculates out to be a good study through a 14-inch telescope. So there we have the core, and we have some aura around it. Certainly not the view you'd get through an observatory quality telescope photographed, or a long-term multi-stacked imaging telescope, such at even a 6-inch would give great views if you took the time to really take a well-tracked image. So there's our view of NGC 7625. Okay, we're now on to NGC 7678, another galaxy in Pegasus. We're at right ascension 23, 28, 27 with a declination of plus 22 degrees, 25 minutes, and 15 seconds. NGC 7678 is considered a spiral AC, not a BC, on the sky live. It supposedly, no way, can't have a 15.3 magnitude. Something's off there. Its average surface brightness per arc second is 22.49, which is fairly bright, size 2 by 1.5, so that makes it a little bit smaller in that database. There's some data issues here. Okay, we're still in the sky's middle third, even though we've leaped about 100 units in the NGC catalog to NGC 7741. Galaxy Pegasus, magnitude 11.3, but large, 4.5 by 2.9 arc minutes, spiral with a bar and a lowercase c, 39 million light years distant. Our right ascension is 2343.54, and declination is plus 26 degrees, 4 minutes and 32 seconds. In terms of 7741, basically the claim is it would take a 22-inch telescope would be useful for it, but the size, apparent size, is a little smaller, 3.6 by 2.4, whereas it was larger on the Gemini 2 handset. This galaxy is specified, not specified in anything in the sky live, but was specified as a spiral with a bar and a lowercase c, with an average surface brightness, let's see if I got this one right, 41. No, it wasn't an SAC. It's oh, there we go. Skipping around. It is a spiral with a bar and a lowercase c. That is correct. Having to consult the sheet here, 7741 in the dark. Magnitude 11.84 in the blue violet, and this one is claiming 11.3 in the visual, so that's about right for a spiral, about 0.5 to 0.7 magnitudes brighter in the visual than in the blue violet. Where it has an average surface brightness, once again, of 23 magnitudes per arc second, 3.6 by 2.4, and a 22-inch telescope should give a good view. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether or not you think this is a good view, but I am satisfied with it. Okay, we just made a leap deeper south, but still barely in the sky's middle third from what I can see, to NGC 7742, Galaxy Pegasus. Magnitude 11.6, but smallish for such a bright galaxy, 1.8 by 1.7, spiral with a lowercase b, 73 million light years distant, so probably about 40,000 light years in diameter. We're at right ascension 2344.15, declination plus 10 degrees 46 minutes. Data on 7742 says it's 12.5 in the blue violet, 22.16 magnitudes per arc second, 1.7 by 1.6. For some reason it says it's magnitude 12.9, which is incorrect. It's 11.6. And a 14-inch scope should give a good view, and I'll leave it up to you. Well, you know, there is the bright core, there is nice faint aura around it, you get a sense of orientation, pretty bright. A lot of this has to do with galactic morphology and the distribution of stars. But that is a fairly potent view of NGC 7742. Well, apparently NGC 7743 was very close to 42. It's magnitude 11.5, 2.8 by 2.4 arc minutes, and I don't remember what 42 was, but let's take a look at that. It was smaller. Yeah, so more bright, obviously brilliant. Spiral with a bar of the lenticular A class, so a half removed from being a lenticular galaxy with a bar. Pretty much face on, so we should see the bar. 71 million light years distant. Right ascension 2344.21, declination 9 degrees 56 minutes and 1 second. 43 should give a good view For some reason it says through a 36-inch telescope. I will have to fix that tomorrow. Looking at other 15.2s, yeah, that's really wrong. So it's got to be fixed. All right, well, I must have fumble-fingered the mathematics on that one. All right, this is an adventitious galaxy. I can't tell you which one it is yet because I forgot what it was when I... Oh! 45. It was NGC 7745. All right, let me get it again. I want to go ahead and check against a fainter galaxy this evening, just so we can get the sense of how clear it is. Of course, the data could be off. There's often data contention. NGC 7745 is a galaxy in Pegasus, magnitude 15.2, 0.7 by 0.7 arc-minute spiral. What I like about this is 767 million light years distant. We're right ascension 234445, declination 255430. I will gather more information on it tomorrow. Clearly the galaxy is visible there. So I've only got 2 bars left on the camera. We need to move on. Oh, have a look at this galaxy and tell me whether or not this is a decent eyepiece view. It's NGC 7769, a galaxy in Pegasus. It's magnitude 12, 1.6 by 1.6 arc-minute spiral with a lowercase b, 190 million light years distant. Right ascension 235104, declination 20 degrees 9 minutes and 1 second. In terms of the calculation on this one, 69 is considered, no, this doesn't make any sense at all. Oh, it's got a 21.79 magnitudes per arc second, and it was also a different size, so that makes sense. 1.8 by 0.6, forget it. This is 1.6 by 1.6. Says it's an 8-inch study, and there's no way this galaxy is an 8-inch study. I would say it's a good 18-inch study, and it's got a beautiful near edge-on spiral galaxy nearby. So the data on this one is not right, and it gave a poor result in terms of determining aperture. Let's move on. This is a pretty brilliant galaxy. NGC 7814, while it's calling up the data from the Gemini 2. 7814, according to the Sky Live, is a spiral of the upper A, lower AB class, which would mean it's a galaxy in the middle of the tuning fork. Magnitude 12, 23.03 magnitudes per arc second, 4.4 by 1.9, and it should give a good view through an 8-inch scope. However, NGC 7814 on the data set is considered magnitude 10.6, 4.7 by 2.4 arc minutes, spiral of the lowercase ab, 47 million light years distant, right on the 0 hour, 3 minutes, 14 seconds, declination 16:08:43. This baby needs a little more calculation, but it is quite brilliant. It's definitely could take a scope, maybe a 10, maybe even an 8-inch, but I have to look at the values again tomorrow to recalculate them. Okay, what we're seeing here is the last galaxy in Pegasus that I was able to extract from the Will Tyrian Sky Guide of 1981, published by Sky and Telescope magazine publishers. NGC 16 is an elliptical, but it's also a spiral of the lenticular, so it is tipping into the elliptical from a spiral. I imagine a lot of that comes down to the kind of stellar spectra they're getting, and how much cold dark matter remains in the galaxy. This one is considered to have a magnitude of 13 in the blue-violet. However, it's magnitude 12 in the visual, 1.8 by 1 arc minute. And the Gemini 2 considers an elliptical class 3. So we've noticed tonight there's quite a bit of variation in citing galaxy types and magnitudes and sizes, etc., etc. This galaxy, NGC 16, is 140 million light years distant. It's at right ascension 0904, declination plus 27 degrees, 43 minutes, and 46 seconds. Calculations based on the data provided from the Sky Live says a 14-inch telescope should give a good view. From what I can say, looking at it, I'd say more like 16 to 18, but we'd have to compare it with the others. What we're going to do now is go out on maybe the core of Messier 31 as our Carpe Noctem. Actually, I like looking at Messier 110 because it gives a really good sense of the sky conditions. Let's go have that as our Carpe Noctem look. Okay, here we have Messier 110 developing on the screen, and I will run some data on tomorrow. It's a galaxy in Andromeda, magnitude 8.1, but quite large, 9.5 by 11.5 arc minutes. It says 3 million light years distant, but it's more like 2.5. We're at right ascension 0 hour, 40 minutes and 22 seconds. Declination 41, 4 degrees, 41 minutes and 5 seconds. It's a fairly faint diaphanous galaxy spreading off in all directions, but frankly, I think we're getting a better view tonight than we got a couple of nights back. So, without any further discussion and leaving some of the resolution of some of the information conflicts to tomorrow, I am going to say Carpe Noctem, but I will make this one observation. I'd say as long as we all agree that the views that we've got of the various galaxies that are in the Wiltirian guide all fall within Pegasus, are giving views that we would consider acceptable if we had a large enough telescope. Remember, we're doing eyepiece observing here, not photography, not image stacking videos, and not real-time imaging. If the views we're getting tonight fall into what you would find to be enjoyable, surprising, and engaging to look in, then I think the mathematical algorithm that we developed a couple of days back would prove useful. And one of the areas it proves useful in is determining whether the data that's been published on various galaxies actually makes sense. Carpe Noctem.